let me run this clip from you. In his address to the Australian Parliament last fall, President Obama reiterated several times what he called a fundamental truth. Let's take a listen, and I want to get your reaction after this.
Our new focus on this region reflects a fundamental truth. The United States has been and always will be a Pacific nation. As President, I have therefore made a deliberate and strategic decision. As a Pacific nation, the United States will play a larger and long-term role in shaping this region and its future by upholding core principles and in close partnership with our allies and friends.
Might seem strange to some of our American audience that the President would be talking that way. Hasn't the U.S. traditionally respected China's dominance in the region, and what's changed? Is it just the spending? Is that what changed the dynamic?
I mean, in a sense, the change elements can be exaggerated. The U.S. has been in the region for a long time, and none of what's being proposed is a particularly dramatic set of shifts in terms of its presence in the region. The one area where things look a bit different is Southeast Asia. That's been an area where, say, during the previous Bush administration, there was criticism directed at the level of attention paid to the region itself and to Asia as a whole. Now, with this administration, there's been a concern to kind of turn that on its head. A lot of the stepping up of U.S. diplomatic attention in the region is to Southeast Asia, and some of these new basing arrangements, like the Australia one that was just mentioned in your clip, and the Philippines as well, are heavily focused around that region. Singapore as well. The new things that are taking place, in a sense, are in that part of the world, and that's partly because it's hotting up militarily. It's partly because countries in the region are asking the U.S. to step in.
But there's been some who are saying that the threat's been exaggerated, and it's basically to drive up the spending at the Pentagon. We've got two wars going away. Got to figure out a way to funnel that cash back into the Department of Defense. And the director of the MIT Security Studies program is quoted recently in the Washington Post as saying, "The old joke about the Office of Net Assessment is that it should be called the Office of Threat Inflation. They go well beyond exploring the worst cases. They convince others to act as if the worst cases are inevitable." Isn't that sort of what's going on here in a way?
Well, I mean, if this was a US-driven thing, then I think the case for that would be strong. A lot of this has been solicited from countries in the region, from traditional allies like the Philippines, and also from new friends like Vietnam, obviously not a US ally, from India. This is the expansion of US presence, the demand for closer military cooperation and things like that. It's not being forced down countries' throats at the moment.
It's easy to look at it through the Western prism. It's easy to look at it from the prism of the allies, but the Chinese prism is, this almost looks like diplomatic encirclement, and in some ways, couldn't this drive up tensions even more?
This is the difficult balancing act. China's military is expanding. In some cases, naturally, its presence is expanding. There are natural reasons for lots of these things to take place, but there is also a natural counter-reaction. I mean, the problem with a lot of these things is that they end up being driven by expanding capabilities and concerns about capabilities on different sides, rather than necessarily intentions. I mean, some of this is very classic security dilemma type stuff. On China's part, of course, it's going to look like this. And conversely, on the U.S. side, it's going to look like China taking a more assertive role, kind of assuming more dominance over countries in the region. The countries in the region, of course, want to have the best of both sides.
When you say dominance, really this is an issue of countries fighting over tiny islands in many respects. And when you look at the Malvinas in Argentina, President Obama was just recently in Cartagena saying, "Look, we're neutral on this. They're not moving ships in that direction. That's a battle between Argentina and Britain." Arguments by countries over islands, that's been going on since the beginning of mankind.
Well, I mean, this is the difficulty. Even for some of the US can't be in a position of taking a strong line on some of these territorial claims. It can't get embroiled in what are still genuinely debated territories in a number of these cases. And I think there's a concern, of course, that if it does too much on the reassurance front, then it will embolden countries like the Philippines and Vietnam to do too much and push things out now while they think they have the US on side, while China's military isn't perhaps as strong as it will be in 10 years' time, and this sort of thing, which makes it a difficult window and a difficult game for the US to play. The question really is there a structure through which this can be resolved between the countries in the region, between China and these countries, or multilaterally? And I think from the US perspective, and even from the countries in the region, turning this into a US-China contest over these things will be extremely harmful to all sides.
Well, I think everybody can be in agreement about that. We don't have a lot more time, but I do want to talk about RIMPAC, which is a multinational maritime exercise held by the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. It takes place every couple of years right off the coast of Hawaii. Runs from June 27th to August 7th. 22 nations involved. The United States invited India and Russia to participate, did not invite China. Was that a snub? And isn't that something where they could actually make some overtures and start to ease some of these tensions, perhaps?
I mean, RIMPAC is, if you were to pick one of the exercises that over time could China take part in them, yes, it's sent observers in the past. The fact that a country like Russia is taking part, in a sense, in another way demonstrates precisely the nature of the thing. This is not a serious kind of allies-based exercise to deal with contingencies in the region or anything like that. There's difficulties on both sides on the China-US military relationship. But I think if to the extent that China's willing over time to cooperate with the US on multilateral activities in the region and outside the region, I mean, this is Asia-Pacific focused. A lot of the best cooperation has actually been taking place, for instance, in the Horn of Africa and things like this, counter-piracy operations. As China develops more of a global military role, there should be able to be closer operational cooperation.
Well, it is a two-way street, so let's hope that happens. Andrew, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.